I'll start to catch us up to where we are, just in case you don't know. We're in the story of Paul's second journey, the second missionary journey. He's as far away from Israel as pretty much he's going to get. He's in the city of Philippi. Philippi is a pretty major city. It's got between 10 and 15,000 people-ish. It's hard to say, but that's a safe estimate. And out of that 10 to 15,000 people, there's less than 10 Jewish men. We know that because there's not a synagogue. And if there had been 10 Jewish men, there would have been a synagogue. But he didn't go to there. He went to the place of prayer outside the river. So this is not a very Jewish place. They're a long way from where they started. Our little team right now is Paul and Silas. They picked up Timothy on the way. And then they picked up Dr. Luke in Troas. And he's with them as well. So we got a party of 4. Last week we talked about 2 women, Lydia and the slave woman. We compared their lives and we looked at how they had some more similarities than maybe we thought. We talked about God's impact in their lives. We talked about households, and this is going to come out again today. That there was an impact on those people, and then those people had a witness, and that witness affected the people around them. In Lydia's case, her household, the people in her world saw the dramatic change in her life, and they believed also because Lydia changed. But you know, the slave woman changed, and her world wasn't very pleased with it. They were pretty upset because it's destroyed their livelihood. They were living off of the fortune telling of the demon that lived in the slave woman. And they've reacted a little differently. And that's what we're going to pick up today. A few more things that I want to remind you of about some Roman things. Philippi is a Roman colony. That means it's run by Roman rules. And it's not physically attached to Rome, but like Tarsus, where Paul was born, Roman colonies are physically detached from the empire of Rome, but it have all the same rules, all the same laws. Roman people who were born there of a specific social status were citizens, and citizens had specific rights. Paul and Silas are both people who were born in Roman colonies. Paul and Silas are both people who were born with those rights. They are Roman citizens. They have been accused by the time this starts of a legitimate crime. The crime is that other religions can exist other than the empire worship. So the official religion of the empire is to worship the emperor. And there's a law that says you can worship other gods, but you may not supplant, you may not proselytize, you may not push your beliefs on anyone else. And so the accusation, as we're going to read, is that they have. And, by the way, they're guilty. Let's keep that in mind as we go. So let's read Acts chapter 16, verses 19 through 40. Acts chapter 16, 19 through 40. And we start with the slave girl's masters. But when her masters saw that their hope of profit was gone, they seized Paul and Silas and dragged them into the marketplace before the authorities. And when they had brought them to the chief magistrates, they said, "These men are throwing our city into confusion, being Jews, and are proclaiming customs which it is not lawful for us to accept or observe, being Romans." And the crowd rose up together against them. And the chief magistrates tore their robes off them, and proceeded to order them to be beaten with rods. When they had inflicted many blows upon them, they threw them into prison, commanding the jailer to guard them securely. And he, having received such a command, threw them into the inner prison and fastened their feet in the stocks. But about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns of praise to God, because that's what we always do in prison. And the prisoners were listening to them. And suddenly there came a great earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison house were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's chains were unfastened. And when the jailer had been roused out of sleep and had seen the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, supposing that the prisoners had escaped. But Paul cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Do yourself no harm, for we are all here." And he called for lights, and he rushed in. Trembling with fear, he fell down before Paul and Silas. And after he brought them out, he said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" And they said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you shall be saved, you and your household." And they spoke the word of the Lord to him together with all who were in his house. And he took them that very hour of the night and washed their wounds, and immediately he was baptized, he and all his household. And he brought them into his house, and he set food before them and rejoiced greatly, having believed in God with his whole household. And when the day came, the chief magistrates sent their policemen, saying, "Release these men." And the jailer reported these words to Paul, saying, "The chief magistrates have sent to release you. Now therefore, come out and go in peace." But Paul said to them, "They have beaten us in public without a trial, men who are Romans, and have thrown us into prison, and now they are sending us away secretly? No, indeed. Let them come themselves and bring us out." The policemen reported these words to the chief magistrates, and they were afraid when they had heard that they were Romans. And they came and appealed to them, and when they had brought them out, they kept begging them to leave the city. And when they went out of the prison and entered the house of Lydia, and when they saw the brethren, they encouraged them and departed. This is a third encounter of Philippi. It has some similarities and some differences to the encounters we've already had. But I want to go through and maybe just work this through verse by verse and see some things that we might be able to pull out of this and understand. So we start with verse 22. The crowd rose up together against them. We know how mob justice is. We know how excited people can get. Oh good, someone's going to get beat. Yay! There's going to be excitement. There's going to be a show. You know, there's no movies. There's no television. It's going to be boring. We need something to watch. So people are getting in trouble, and everyone's very excited. The mob's all excited. Yay, let's have someone beaten we can watch. The thing is, in verse 23, when they had inflicted many blows on them, it goes straight to beating with rods. Now, I got to tell you something. We know it from verse 37 that Paul's willing to state that he's a Roman citizen, because he says it later. I don't know about you, but let's just work this through. I'm here, you're about to come strip my clothes off and beat me with sticks. And I know that I'm a Roman citizen and I can demand a trial. Why not open my mouth now, before I get beat? Wouldn't that be the time? Wouldn't that be, no, woo-hoo. Stop with the sticks, please. I'm a Roman citizen. I need a trial. I get a trial now. And yet they don't say anything. I find that a little weird. It's certainly not what I would have done. I would not have just gone, oh yeah, just right here. A little to the right. You didn't get that part yet. You know, I'm not sure I would have just took it. Why? What motive could they have for just keeping silent when they beat the snot out of them? There's a couple possibilities. Let me just share with you. One of them is, like I already mentioned, perhaps it had something to do with the fact that they knew they were guilty. I mean, imagine how weird this would be. Stop. We get a trial. We're Romans. Oh, you're Romans. Yes, you're right. We need a trial. Everyone stop. Stop, everyone, stop. Okay. We have to have a trial. You're accused of such and such. How do you plead? Guilty. Yeah, we did that. You demanded a trial, you asked for all of this, you said you had to have a shot, and then you just pled guilty. Yep. That might have been the reason they just said, no, just go ahead and do this. You know, I grew up in a Christian home, and one of my dad's sayings about standing up for what you believe is that if you're going to stand up for what you believe, then you're willing to kind of deal with the consequences of that. There's a sequence. I would hope. I'm praying that this doesn't happen in my life, and even more so in my children's lifetimes. I'm praying against, Lord, would you just delay a little longer? I don't want to have to be in that generation, whatever that is, where I'm standing in front of my country or someone else's country, and they're saying, you know, it's against the law to share your faith. Did you share your faith? Yes, I did. Well, you're going to jail or we're killing you. I hope that's never me, but there's people that live in China, and there's people who live in other places, and it is them. And as much as they try not to get caught, the stories I read of their faith and the stories I read of their testimony isn't that when they get caught and they're brought up in front of the authorities, that the authorities say that they did this and they lie. That's not what I hear them do. The heroes of the faith, when confronted, did you indeed share your faith of Jesus Christ? Are you proclaiming that Jesus is Lord? You know what they say? Yes.
Amen.
I pray that I would have the strength to do that if I had to. So the truth of the matter is, if Paul and Silas had demanded a trial, and they asked whether they had been doing the things that they were accused of, they would have had to have said yes. Maybe that's why they chose not to worry about it. Then there's another possibility. Perhaps, you know, Jesus went to the cross silently, for the most part. He didn't mount this huge legal battle of defense of why he shouldn't go to the cross, did he? Why? Because it was God's will that he go to the cross. Perhaps Paul and Silas knew deep in their souls that this is part of God's plan. We're in line with what God's doing. This is the way it's supposed to go. And if God's plan includes a beating, we can deal with it. Are we there? Spiritually? Are we at the place where if we said, God's plan for my life so that he can reach other people includes me being beat down? Okay. It's a hard question to have to ask ourselves. And when we face trials and when we face persecution for our faith, we don't tend to look at it as joyously sometimes as we should. But we're going to find out that Paul and Silas are facing it pretty joyously. Because they get beat with rods, and then in verse 23, when they inflicted many blows upon them, I don't know how many is, that's a vague number, more than a few. They did it a while. Many blows. Without going, stop, stop, stop. Wait, I'm a Roman citizen. You have to stop. Give me a trial. And they're thrown into prison. Now, Cheryl and I have had the privilege of being able to travel quite a bit in Europe. We've traveled a lot of everywhere. And when we were in Europe, we got to go to Greece, and we got to go to Athens, and we got to go to some of these places. And we've been to ruins. You know, jails, and that's one of the things you get shown, right? You get shown, and here's the chamber of the leaders, you know, and it's a place about the size of our living room. And we imagine these, you know, vast throne rooms with some dais with a throne, and this is, no, you know, and here's where the leaders met in some, like, spot like this big. Like, really? That was their, okay. Yeah, everything was much smaller and simpler than I ever imagined. I always imagined something grand. Jails, for the most part, that we saw of these ancient cities are just another room. They're another section of the city walled off. They're just another spot with a door. They could be a part of somebody's home. They could be underneath the jailer's house. Could be underneath the magistrate's house. There's lots of interesting places that these jails are. They're not walled cities with guards and bars and they're a room in the city. So they're going, and they get thrown in. In verse 24, the jailer has been commanded to guard them securely. And so what he does is he throws them into the inner prison, and he fastens their feet in stocks. This is pretty secure. I don't know if you've ever had your feet in stocks. I've tried it momentarily. It got uncomfortable very quickly. Like 2 minutes. And I was like, okay, we're done now. I can stop. That's enough. Two was great. You can take them off. Then in verse 25, about midnight, long after I would have been really complaining about the stocks, Paul and Silas are praying and singing hymns of praise to God in the middle of the night. And the other prisoners are listening to them because they have no choice, amongst other things, because this is a small room. They might be a little annoyed for all I know. We would sleep if you would quit singing. But that isn't one of the options. This isn't a very big spot. Paul and Silas are in there. They've got their feet in stocks, and they're singing praises to God. I'm reminded of some of the songs that David wrote when he had lamentations, when he was under duress. And many of the songs are songs of Lord, my people oppress me, and yet you are with me. And maybe Paul was singing songs of David. I don't know what he was singing. I know he was a Pharisee, so his knowledge of the Old Testament was probably way better than mine. But they're singing, praising God. And I'm reminded of James 1:2. Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials. James being the first book of the Bible written. I'm sure that Paul's read it. Paul's remembering the advocation. He's like, yes, this is the time. And so they're there and they're praising God in the midst of their imprisonment. But we've talked about this so many times, it's just worth repeating again. As a Christian, we give much more testimony. There's much more power in how we react to what is bad than how we live when things are good. When things go badly for us, when things are difficult, when things don't go well, when our kids get sick, when we have tragedy, the way we react as a Christian is exactly what it is we're supposed to be saying we have a solution to. The whole point of being a Christian is to be able to say, I can go through tragedy and have joy. Isn't that the whole point? And if we don't live it, we say what we believe is a lie. If we say all the time, I have this God that gives me hope, I have this God that gives me strength, I have this God that can take the worst and turn it into what's good, and then when the bad actually happens to us, and how we react is just like how everyone else reacts, we just take our testimony and flush it down the toilet. Because all we've done is proven that it's a bunch of things we say, but it doesn't actually impact the way we react when we're the ones in the hot seat. So it's important that when we're the ones in trouble, that when it's our lives that are rough, that we remember that's the moment that people are seeing whether our faith is real, whether our God is real, and what's in us is real. That's when they're judging. And so they're singing. In verse 26, there comes a great earthquake. Now this accounts possibly for the doors opening. It certainly doesn't account for the chains coming loose. But I have to say, have you ever been in an earthquake? Quite. See, we have. Okay. I'm trying to imagine the worst possible scenario for being in an earthquake. And I'm thinking that my feet in a chained block that I can't move, this massive block, and I'm chained in and I can go nowhere, that has got to be the most terrifying way to experience an earthquake I can imagine. You're going nowhere. If the ceiling falls in, oh well, here I go. You can't move, you can't go outside, you can't go to all those things we say, move to a doorway. It's the safest place in the house. And I wonder how much of that is just like, we're giving you something to do so you don't panic. Yeah, that's it. Move to doorway. Anyway. These can go anywhere. I gotta say, if I was Paul and Silas in the middle of an earthquake, chained to a large wooden block, that wouldn't have been the most comfortable place to be in that occasion. Sometimes God uses events that do not seem like they should be comfortable or helpful to save us, to do great things in us, to do great things in our lives. If we are too quick to judge, we might miss it. Because if you ask me, the opening part of this scenario, there's an earthquake and I'm in stocks, doesn't sound extremely positive. And yet it is exactly the method that God plans to use to save them from jail. So again, as Christians, not only do we have to be careful how we react in adversity, we need to be careful about how we react about our first impressions, about what God is doing in our lives. And we can be so quick to judge, oh, that's an awful thing. Maybe. Where's your faith? Where is your faith? If we really believe in an omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, that means he's got all the power, he knows everything, and he's all good. And if we actually believe all those qualities exist in one being, why do we worry about the events that happen to us? But we do. And so there's this horrible event, seemingly. Except that all the doors are open and everyone's chains come off, and then it isn't quite so scary anymore. Now it seems like a miracle. And then we get to some really important stuff. This is where the sermon really starts. And when the jailer had been roused out of sleep and had seen the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself, supposing that the prisoners had escaped. Well, I've done a little bit of research here. This is not the only example we have in Scripture of prisoners getting loose or guards losing their thing. Right? Jesus was being guarded. That should have been an easy one. He was dead. Keep the dead guy from leaving. Should have been cake. Right? Didn't work. Those guards didn't kill themselves. Didn't act like they were going to kill themselves. Didn't take any action to kill themselves. Peter has come out of jail 3 different times. Miraculously. Not one time do we read, and the guards took their swords to kill themselves. Just trying to paint the contrast here. Trying to give you a picture of this person, about where this person might be at, a little bit different than some of the other people we've met. This is the only one on record that immediately considered suicide. Out of all the examples. I want to come back to that in a second. So hold on to that. Verse 28. But Paul cried out with a loud voice, saying, "Do yourself no harm, for we are all here." I don't know how this works. How do you convince everyone else not to leave? I get it why Paul and Silas didn't leave, but all the other prisoners that were in the room could have left too, and they don't. There's no explanation whatsoever. None. Except, the only one I can come up with is, God didn't want this jailer to get in trouble. He had a different plan. And if the other prisoners had escaped and Paul and Silas were still there, the jailer would have this would have been a mess for him. I mean, his life would have been a problem. So, apparently, God didn't want that to happen. And so, he kept everyone else from leaving. There really isn't that much more of an explanation. Which points again to the omnipotence of God. That he can do whatever it is he wants to do. And in this case, he wants to keep all the prisoners there. So he does. Then we move into verse 29. We have a picture of the jailer. He's called for lights, which would be torches, not a switch. And he rushed in trembling and fear, he fell down before them. And he brings them out, and he asks them a question. He says, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" Now, see, I don't know all of you. I'm assuming that the people in this room have all been to church before. That we all speak Christianese. We all have a shared language. We all think of the word, "What must I do to be saved?" And that doesn't sound weird to us. It doesn't sound weird to us because we speak salvation speak. We speak Christian. We all know what that means. Of course you would ask how to be saved. He's asking how to be a Christian. What's the big deal? Why is that a weird thing? It's a weird thing because this guy's never heard of Jesus in his life. There's 10 Jewish men or less than 10, in a city of 10 to 15,000. He doesn't even know Jewish people. He knows nothing. He doesn't have any concept, knowledge, exposure to what they believe at all. He's a Roman. He worships Athena and Zeus and Dionysus. And he goes to the oracle to get advice. Why would he ask? And what must I do to be saved? Let me put it a different way. How can I be rescued? Now the first thought might be, rescued from legal trouble. Except none of the prisoners left. He's not in legal trouble anymore. Now, his problem was that the reason he was going to stab himself through with a sword is because he was responsible for those prisoners. There was an earthquake, and he was afraid everyone left, and so he was scared to death he was going to get in trouble. But when he comes in, all the prisoners are still there, so his problem is solved. His practical problem is solved. He knows nothing about Christianity. Where does this question come from? What must I do to be rescued? Where does that flow from? Well, maybe what's going on in this man's life, maybe the tragedies that he is facing are a bit broader than this problem at the jail. Why would I come to that conclusion? How am I getting all the way there? Well, I'm going to skip over a second. Because part of this question that I have in my head is, why was he so quick to take that sword and put it on his chest and kill himself? Why was he so close to that decision? And I know this is an uncomfortable topic. We don't talk about it very much, but I want to talk a little bit about the topic of suicide, and in the process maybe educate us about where this man might have to be. The average suicide rate in Australia is about 2,795 a year. People kill themselves in Australia. That comes out to, every year, about 12 out of every 100,000 people end their own lives each year in Australia. That's about 3 times higher for men than for women. You might think that there's actually more than one explanation for that. One of them is that men pick more lethal methods. See, there's actually far more women that end up in the hospital for harming themselves. they tried. But men do things like guns and jumping from extremely high places. Men tend to choose because men are more violent. So even not only are men more violent to other people, men are more violent to themselves. When they pick a method of violence, men are more effective. So women are more likely to attempt and not succeed. So that makes up for some of that difference in numbers. But as we look out worldwide, as we look at the planet as a whole, as we look at where is our world going? And then is our world getting more optimistic? Is it becoming a better world? Is it a brighter world? Is it a happier world? In the last 45 years, the escalation of suicide has been over 60%. So just let that number kind of sink into your brain. That's not like 5%, 60% more suicide than 45 years ago worldwide. Because the world isn't becoming a better, happier, lighter place. Worldwide, when we're talking about causes of death between the ages of 15 and 44, suicide's in the top 3 causes. Here's one for you. For every successful suicide, there's an estimated 20 attempts that were not successful. So you have to take whatever those numbers are and multiply them by 20 to get the amount of people who are in the headspace of, I want to end my life.
Wow.
This world is grit and despair. Now, why suicide? I've actually had substantial training in suicide prevention and response, part of my responsibilities of my previous work. And it's very helpful for the work I'm doing now, obviously. Tragedy and crisis by no means equal the desire to kill yourself. I just want you to know that. Just because something absolutely horrible happens in a person's life, and no means the predictor that they would then want to die. That isn't actually the trigger. That's not the issue. Being sad. Nope. Here it is. You want to know what the single element that you're looking for in a person that's willing to kill themselves is. This is the key. This is what you're looking for. A sense of pain of some kind. Physical, emotional, mental pain. With no hope of change. No hope is ever going to get better. A feeling that, a lie that I am trapped. There is no way out. I am in this darkness and I hate it and there is no path forward. And since there is no way out of my pain, I would prefer to be dead. That is the qualification. That's the issue. You see, when I take that knowledge of what it means, why a person commits suicide, and apply it to this man in our story that puts a sword to his chest, that puts a different spin on it. It's true that he's facing a crisis, but there's a lot of outcomes to this crisis. There was just an earthquake. Maybe my boss would be forgiving. There was an earthquake. It isn't my fault. Maybe I could find the prisoners. Maybe I could get a posse together. Maybe a lot of things. Just because the prisoners have escaped doesn't mean this has to be over. And a person in a different headspace would have thought of all those things and tried them. They would have attempted to save their own life. The fact that he immediately takes a sword and puts it to his chest tells me he is in a place where this is the last straw. This is it. This is the breaking point. My life sucks. And now the prisoners have left and I'm done. I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done. I don't think this man's only problem was the prisoners escaping. I think he has bad problems. And so when he says to Paul and Silas, who are singing in the jail, who are cheerfully telling him, oh, we're still here, they're in the midst of pain, and he doesn't see how they can get out, and yet they have joy. And he says, wait. How do I have that?
Amen.
What's that? What's that life? What's that attitude? What's that freedom? What's that power? I don't understand that. How do I get rescued from my life to have your life? How do I get out of my trap and live in your freedom? Because I'm a free man and you're in a jail cell and you have more freedom than I have. We look at world religions as a whole, and I've been teaching world religions on Tuesdays, and we talked about Buddhism. Buddhism is all across, facing this way, we got China and all the Far East, and Buddhism covers a massive part of the world. I don't know how much you know about Buddhism, but the whole concept behind Buddhism is, my life is so horrible. Living is horrible. But not only that, check this out. I believe in reincarnation, and the next life is going to be bad too. I already know it's going to be bad. That's the concept of Buddhism. Existence is pain. They can't even commit suicide to get out of the cycle because you just get reborn again into another miserable life. And so their hope, their entire hope, this is what they're searching for. This is their ultimate destination. That I would learn to get rid of all of my wants, all of my desires of anything, so that I can reach nirvana. You know what nirvana is? Buddha explained it like this. It's where the flame goes when you blow it out. It's spiritual suicide. It is the end of your soul. Their entire hope, what they're aiming for, is could I quit existing so I could have peace? Because to exist is to have pain. Now, if we look at that, that's a lot of India going into China, all the way up here. If you look at China and India put together, they account for 30% of the suicide on the entire planet. A third of the people who kill themselves are from that culture. A culture of complete hopelessness. A culture that says you cannot fix the pain. There's no answer to the pain. There's no solution to the pain. There is no hope out of the pain. All there is maybe you could die permanently someday. On a practical level, in case you haven't had any suicide training, I do want to just cover some basics. If you encounter someone who you feel might want to hurt themselves, I have some basic steps that I would want you to consider to take. 1, ask them the question. I know it seems really uncomfortable, and now it sounds really weird, but just open your mouth and say, are you thinking of hurting yourself? 2, determine if there is a plan. There are stages to the suicide issue. There is, I'm just in pain, and right now I'm thinking that hurting myself would be a good idea. Past that, there is, I want to do that really badly, and I've actually come up with a plan. This is how I want to do it. The next step after that step is, I have a plan and I have the stuff. Do they have the materials? I have this plan to shoot myself in the head with a 12-gauge shotgun. Do you own a 12-gauge shotgun? No. Okay. That's a specific situation. That is different than, I have one right over there. Okay, those two things are not the same. 3, get help. Don't try to do it by yourself. Call somebody who has experience or profession of working with mentally ill people. You can call me anytime you find that you're in a difficult discussion and you want assistance. Call me. So getting back to our story, I believe this man is pleading to be rescued from his life. I believe this man is pleading to be rescued from the pain and agony of what it means to be him. By the way, I searched the scriptures. I didn't find anyone else who ever asked that question. Shocking. There's the rich young ruler who said, "What must I do to obtain eternal life?" A little bit different question. Jesus responded in a different way. This man is saying, "What must I do to be rescued?" And so in verse 31, they give the answer. And they said, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you shall be saved. You shall be rescued, you and your household." They said, believe. Believe in this case means to put your dependence upon. It isn't just a belief of, it's a belief in. Right? It isn't just a belief of the facts. It is a dependence upon. It is a faith that they're asking him to do. Believe in. And then they say the word Lord, an acknowledgement that we must make of the authority that Jesus Christ has, that he is a Lord. He is in control. And then they get to the most important bit, Jesus Christ, the miraculous person of God who became man, who died to pay for our sin and rose again to rule. And they tell him about Jesus and who Jesus is, so that he can have faith in Jesus Christ. I love the fact that so close together with Lydia, we have the other side of the coin, so to speak, about free will and determinism. If we go to the story of Lydia back in in verse 14, we talked a bit last week. In Acts 16:14, there was a certain woman named Lydia from the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple fabric, a worshiper of God, was listening, and the Lord opened her heart to respond to the things spoken by Paul. And we focused for a while on all the focus that's been put in Acts upon how God acts to save people. And yet here we are in the same chapter, and he says, "What must I do to be rescued?" And this isn't what Paul says. Paul doesn't say, well, as it turns out, either God picked you or you didn't. So if God picks you, you're saved, and if God didn't pick you, well then too bad, you're going to die. He puts it in his corner. He says, what you need to do is believe. So here in the same chapter we have, it is God who saves, and yet this man must decide whether he's going to believe. I like that tension. I like the fact that those two ideas are put so closely together. And so as we go from there, I'm out of time. I was going to tell another story, and we're going to now move on. As we move into 32 and 34, and they spoke the word of the Lord to him together with all who were in his house. And he took them at that very hour of the night and washed their wounds, and immediately he was baptized, he and his whole household. And they brought him into his house and set foot before them, and rejoiced greatly, having believed in God with his whole household. Household was mentioned 4 times. But it is absolutely clear that Paul and Silas shared the truth with all of them. It wasn't as if he believed on their behalf. He believed, and he came and he shared, and Paul came and shared with everyone, and he told the truth to everyone, and they as a group all believed. Notice that they were baptized before morning. Talk about immediate. We talk about, when should baptism be? Should we wait to make sure that it's real? They were baptized before breakfast. It was the middle of the night. They were singing at midnight, and by the time the guards come in the morning to come pick them up, they've been baptized already. I mean, woo! Let's get you wet. impacted her household, just like the slave girl had impacted her household. When God worked in the life of the jailer, something happened that was so profound, so powerful, so revealing, so real, that his whole household said, that's got to be it. That's got to be God. In verse 34, we go from the terror. Remember, he fell and he went to look for Paul and Silas, and he went in because there was an earthquake, and he went in terror. And by verse 34, it's great joy. Rejoicing greatly. And this is the power of Jesus Christ in our lives. That he would take fear of the future, terror, pain, agony, and turn it into great joy. This is it. This is the promise. This is what Jesus is supposed to bring into our lives. This transformation from fear and terror to great joy. Then as we continue on, I just want to finish the story for the sake of continuity. The jailer reported these things to Paul. The chief magistrate has sent for you to release you. Now therefore come out and go in peace. And then in verse 37, a funny thing happens. Paul said to them, they have beaten us in public without a trial, men who are Romans, and have thrown us into prison, and now they're sending us away secretly. No, indeed, they can come here themselves and bring us out. Why bring it up now? He had all these other opportunities to bring up the fact that he's a Roman citizen, and he waits till now to bring it up. I don't know if you know any people in your life that have the gift of evangelism. I live with one. You know, they look for every excuse they can possibly find to share the power of God. All of them. I'm not so good at it. I'm the pastor. I'm supposed to be good at everything. I should, right? I should have like every spiritual gift in the entire column, right? Because I'm a pastor, so that should be me. And that's not true. I'm gifted at a few things, and things I struggle with, just like you struggle with. So I go to the grocery store, and those of you who know me know that even though I'm totally comfortable talking to you now, I'm pretty shy in real life. And I struggle to strike up conversations, and I struggle to say things, and I struggle to bring up this stuff. Cheryl, on the other hand, will talk to absolutely anyone within 5 feet, or 10, or half a mile. And in the process, she will find a reason to tell a story about the glory of God. Paul has the gift of evangelism. Why does he call for the magistrates? He wants the magistrates to see what happened. He wants them to see the joy. He wants them to, hey, look at all of us in the house together. We were at the jail. We're not there anymore. Ask us what happened. We're going to share with you the power of Jesus Christ. There was an earthquake. Doors open. Chains flew off. Explain it. God's real. Who can I tell about this story? And if I can get the magistrates here to talk about it, let's go.
Amen.
I think he's just looking for one more audience to show the power of God to. Let them come themselves and set us free. All right. Isn't it amazing what happens in our lives when the primary focus becomes sharing the love and power of God rather than our own comfort or our own prosperity or our own whatever, and suddenly all these things that happen in our lives take on a whole different view. If our attitude is, how can we use it to glorify God and show His power?
That's right.
But the magistrates, they were just interested in them leaving as quickly as possible so they didn't get embarrassed and in trouble. So in verse 39, they came and appealed to them, and when they had brought them out, they kept begging them to leave the city. Please leave before we get busted for treating Romans like this. And they went out of the prison and entered the house of Lydia. When they saw the brethren, they encouraged them and departed. And that ends our story of the episode of what happens in Philippi. I don't know if there's despair in your life. I don't know if there's someone else in your life facing despair. We read today about a man who was in despair. He had a lethal weapon, the most lethal weapon he could get that was available, at his chest, ready to plunge it. And the power of Jesus Christ turned that despair to joy in hours. As Christians, we actually have the solution to the problem.
That's right.
It's not just a philosophical argument. It's not whether or not we win the debate. It's not whether or not we can convince people of a factualness. It isn't necessarily all that. It's an offer of, we have the fix. We have the solution. As we consider how we support overseas missionaries, as we consider how we support nearer missionaries, or we consider how we ourselves impact the world around us, do we really grasp the power of what it is we have and how desperately badly everyone else needs it? And if you're in a place in your life where you're like, Keith, I go to church and I'm here, and yet I seem to feel the same despair that this guy's feeling, we need to talk. Please come talk. Because the power of Jesus Christ is the power to transform. And if you don't feel transformed, we need to work through this. It isn't just something to believe in, it is something to have that makes us different. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, it is so awesome to see the story of transformation of this jailer's life. Lord, would you wake us up? Wake us up to the reason that we face trials, the reason that we face difficulty, so that we can show a difference, so that we can demonstrate what's real. That we can be a living testimony to the fact that God changes us. Because that, Lord, I believe is what's going to affect the world around us. Because we can say whatever it is we say, but they need to see the power of Jesus Christ in their lives. Lord, could we go so far as to say we want to be eager for chances to demonstrate your power and grace? Would you make us ambitious for opportunities to show your grace in difficulty? Would our praise in the midst of our storm not be out of habit or out of simply because, well, God told me I'm supposed to pray in difficulty, so here I am, I'm going to pray. God, would you change us so that we were actually joyfully praising you for this chance to show your power to the people around us, to our neighbors, to our friends, to the people who don't know you, that we would be praising you. Thank you, God, for this chance to show that there's power in Jesus Christ that makes us different and makes us joyful even when things are hard. That this would be the witness that changes them forever, that makes them realize there is hope. There is real, real hope. Lord, would you help us figure out how to share your love with people who are desperately hurting. A world that is so hurting and lost and hopeless that the only thing they consider many, many times is just to end it. It's too hard. Would you make us compassionate and powerful in our intervention, even as Paul and Silas were able to intervene in this man's life? In Jesus' name we pray.